Dee, just let me know when it's time to go.
I will do. We're just adding Ruchama. We've got a bit of an echo. Let's see if that's fixed the problem. Okay, no more echo, and we're just waiting for Dr. Ruchama to join as a panelist. She is. So she should be joining you shortly. Great. Okay, over to you, Samia.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've all managed to grab a bite of lunch before the afternoon sessions. So I'm very pleased to now welcome our next speaker. So you'll have noticed that the title of the conference is Mental Health in Palestine and Israel. And the reason for this is that there's two reasons for this, really. Is that, first of all, the war on the mind is destructive not only for the occupied, but for the occupier. And the mind of the occupier as well is very destructive and oppressive for both sides, really. And this is what Dr. Marton will be talking to us about today. The other reason that we wanted to invite an Israeli speaker is because we really want to highlight the work of the Israelis, the small number of Israelis who are dissidents, really, and who are allies to the Palestinian cause. We think their work is really important. This alliance really needs to be highlighted, deserves to be highlighted. Their work and their voices are very important too. And it also kind of challenges the accusation that's often made against Palestinian solidarity activists that we are anti-Semitic. So to have Jewish voices and Jewish Israeli voices on the side of the Palestinians is a really challenge to this accusation. So Ruchama, she founded Israeli Physicians for Human Rights. So she's been involved both in mental health and human rights work for a very long time. And she's also very involved in feminist activism. And we're very pleased to welcome you today, Ruchama. And over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, that's very good.
If we can't hear you, we'll let you know if we can't hear you.
Good. So first of all, thank you very much. I apologize for reading because it's in English and my English is not very fluent. So can I begin?
Yes.
Very good. Let me speak to אבל אולי אפשר להזיז את זה שנייה. No. Okay. Can you hear me now? No.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. So after thanking you for having me, I would like to talk about the psyche of the Zionist Israeli collective, which I will shorten this very long thing into one word, ZIC, Zionist Israeli collective. In the context of the Israeli occupation and apartheid, I will explain the psychological mechanism of accompanying the historical process of the occupation and apartheid, with the help of a number of concepts from psychodynamic theory and psychiatry, namely splitting, cognitive dissonance, and antisocial personal disorder. Those who maintain the occupation in practice are the IDF soldiers, the border policemen and women, but they are not alone. These young people have parents and siblings, families, teachers and friends. These Israelis are telling themselves that they are protecting the homeland, but actually they are sending their sons and daughters to a mental sacrifice of Isaac. The level of deceit, denial, and silencing, together with the level of violence, have increased with time, and it has a high cost. This cost is also denied and repressed, which only increases the cost. The outcome is transformation of the symptoms that were caused by the occupation into a mental and practical acceptance of the concept of Jewish supremacy and apartheid. There are those who have become disillusioned, at least partially. For example, the organization Breaking the Silence, which was established in 2004 by good Zionist soldiers whose conscience troubled them in response to the militaristic repression. The goal of this organization is to, and I'm quoting, expose the Israeli public to the reality of everyday life in the occupation territories and to stimulate public debate about the moral price paid for the control of Palestinian civilian population with the aim of ending the occupation. End of quote. An illustration to the silencing, I will give one. The writer Alona Kimchi wrote for Breaking the Silence the song by the name To Kill is a Matter of Habit. Beautiful song. The song was not allowed to be heard on the radio. Breaking the Silence was denounced as fraudulent, traitorous organization. The Israeli regime cannot stand dissent. Criticism is immediately perceived as anti-Semitism or treason. For example, in a tense argument between Physicians for Human Rights and the Israeli Medical Association, IMA, concerning torture in the early 90s, the IMA's chairman wrote, it was about me. She is a dangerous woman. She is anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist, and anti-Semitic. Though he said it in the early 90s, he could say today as well. Let me say now a few words about the psychological term of splitting. The power and allure of this defense mechanism lie in its simplicity. The splitting mechanism contains just two extreme options, good and bad. There is nothing in between. According to Melanie Klein, this mechanism divides the world into good and bad, both within the person and in the world around him. The split caused by a high level of anxiety, which leaves the person without an ability to make a choice and is considered to be the most primitive defense mechanism. From an emotional perspective, this split serves several masters in the Zionist Israeli collective. I remind you, the Zik. It allows creating a clear, consistent, and undisputed barrier between the internal good and the external bad. That is, we, the Zionist Israeli Jews, are good and moral. Our weapons are pure. We want peace, but we must fight for our existence. We are the victims of the Palestinians and the worldwide wickedness. On the outside dwells all the evil that is not within us: cruelty, warmongering, racism, lies, disrespect for agreements, filth and primitivism. As the general said, we are a villa in the jungle. In a similar way, the Zionist left sees all the good in itself and all the evil in the settlers in the occupied territories. The split does not allow to work through the sources of the anxiety, but rather helps create an emotional distance from these sources. It keeps parts of reality invisible. In this manner, the suffering we inflict on the Palestinians is not visible to us. Moreover, the distress and suffering of the Palestinians is attributed to their inherent evilness, means their nature. In order to support this viewpoint, the Zik ignores the immense power of the Israeli army and keeps alive the collective memory of being the Holocaust victim, and in this manner maintains the collective identity of victimhood. I can see this psychodynamic in individuals in therapy. When perceiving oneself as a victim, a person feels entitled to be mean, cruel, and unjust, deriving his or her energy from fear, from anger and hate, and creating similar feelings in his or her partner. A vicious circle is set in motion. Hate, it's very important. Hate is the inverted libido energy of love. It can serve the ego as a source of energy and might turn into an addiction. Hate nourishes angry feelings and actions. Hate and anger will usually serve the ego with a sense of righteousness, efficacy, and self-preservation. As in many addictions, reality testing is very pure or even absent.
Very poor.
Very poor. Thank you. Reality testing is very poor or even absent. For the sake of a sense of well-being and self-preservation, a person or a collective ridden with hate are capable of destroying the environment, the other, but also themselves. The projection of hatred onto the Palestinians serves as cohesive force in Jewish Israeli society. Perceiving the Palestinians as hated and mighty enemy, in spite of their evident weakness, provides the Israelis with the sense that their energies are invested in self-preservation. Hate towards the Palestinians functions as the outlet of the Israeli fear of inner fragmentation. The price paid for inner peace is avoiding peace with the Palestinians. No chance that there will be peace with the Palestinians. The Zik is characterized by ahistorical perception. I'm quoting, in each generation, they stand up to destroy us, which means starting with Amalek, continuing with the Nazis, and now the Palestinians. They are all merged into one entity, which is disconnected from historical time and context, and the current, as well as the current reality. There is a split between cause and effect. For example, in the beginning of the Second Intifada, a popular Israeli slogan was, "Let the IDF win." Ariel Sharon used this slogan in his campaign for prime minister. The meaning of this slogan in reality is simple, clear to everyone, and catchy: to apply extensive military force against the Palestinians so that we can ensure our safety and to overcome them. Indeed, a great amount of military force was applied, but no personal or national safety was obtained. Suicide bombers blow themselves up in blew themselves up in restaurants, buses, and city squares. The natural fear of citizens from being killed was joined by a new fear whose source is cognitive dissonance. How come, asked the frightened citizens, that this great force, which I was promised would prevail and protect my life, is unable to stand up to its promise? That was terrible. Cognitive dissonance calls for a behavior that decreases the dissonance. The Zik is unable to give up the cognition that the Arabs only understand force. It's an axiom. You cannot argue with it. And hence, the application of force is vital. Giving up this view that force is necessary could destroy the militaristic character of Israel and the basic assumption of the Zik politics will fall apart. On the other hand, it is not possible to ignore the atrocities of the suicide bombing that are shown on the television all the time. So what can one do? Apply psychological blindness to the connection between the facts, and it works. When there is no connection between Israeli terrorism and the Palestinian terrorism, it is possible to decrease the cognitive dissonance. However, despite all the power that is in their hands, Israelis are frightened, feel helpless, confused, feeling unprotected. Therefore, there was a need to find an answer to the fear and anxieties and so on, without harming the political principle of applying more force. The solution to this problem was the form of more separation, to build a separation wall. This wall is a realization and concretization of the emotional political need for disconnect. It protects the enlightened villa and its inhabitants from the Arab predators around it. It was unmistakably a political plan that increased the threshold of violence and satisfied the need for revenge, which is a big one. House demolition, uprooting all olive groves, land expropriations, but especially and most importantly, providing a calming element to the terrified and frustrated Zik. And indeed, most of Zik was immediately captivated by the spell of the separation wall. The apartheid regime received exactly what it needed on the ground. I refer now to the antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial personality disorder is characterized by a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others, manifested by repeated unlawful behavior, irritability and aggressiveness involving frequent assaults or fights. This is from the dictionary. A lack of remorse for the mistreatment of others is characteristic of antisocial personality disorder. The more extreme is the mistreatment, the more remarkable is the lack of remorse for it. In this personality disorder, the person sees only what harmed him. He is not able to see the context or his part in the situation. The price for the elongated Israeli occupation of the Palestinian population is a society that sacrifices the mental health of its children and youth, breeding generations of monsters, I repeat, of monsters, with poor and defective morals, creating an aggressive society that despises and crushes the weak. The number of women murdered mountains, rape cases increased. Israel is the first place in the West for juvenile criminality. Zionism today suffers from religion poisoning on the existing basis of power poisoning. The combination of religion and Zionism allows for the establishment of Jewish supremacy, which is an ideological pillar of the apartheid regime that exists in an explicit and aggressive way for many years. The Zik does not talk anymore about the occupation, and not by accident, because it has accepted the occupation as an obvious situation in all its manifestations, has become a norm in the Zik existence. From an emotional state of denial, the Zik has moved to an emotional state of acceptance of the occupation as a normal part of its reality. As Naftali Bennett, his Knesset member, said, we have stopped apologizing. Obviously, There is no need to apologize for a normal situation. Only one who feels no moral discomfort needs to apologize. The righteous has no such need. In other words, the Zik has moved from a state of neurotic symptoms like anxiety, guilt, denial, etc., to a state of psychopathy. In essence, the historical split that existed between the Zionist right segment and of the Zik and its Zionist left segment has been overcome. Historically, the Zionist left held the guilt and anxiety on behalf of the collective as a whole, while the Zionist right felt controlled and silenced by the Zionist left. By now, the Zionist right has succeeded in silencing the neurotic voices of the Zionist left. So the voice that can be heard in the public sphere is the psychopathic voice of the Zionist right. The Zik overcome the splitting, which is insufficient emotionally, by moving to a state of acceptance, the Jewish supremacy and apartheid. Jewish supremacy manifested itself in the feeling that we deserve whatever we want and are allowed to do whatever we please. A psychopathic society has formed. No atrocities trouble its normal peace of mind. Not the demolition within Israel, for example, like El Arqib for like 200 times demolishing this poor village, and not the killing and destruction in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli normalcy easily contains them. This abnormality is the Zik normality. The director, a friend of mine, Eyal Sivan, defined this as normopathia. Hence, there is no point to write in the newspapers and the media at large about house demolition, murder of demonstrators, assassinations, arbitrary arrests, prolonged administrative detention, and the like. It is the boring language of the occupation that is not spoken anymore. We have moved to a new stage, a worse stage, the stage of acceptance of the crimes without apology. I took out a lot of history in order not to be too long, but I cannot speak today without referring to the ongoing war in the last few days, especially to what's happening inside Israel's cities. I saw the other day on the TV the lynch in Bat Yam. Bat Yam is a city, a large one in Israel. These are inevitable results of the occupation. The spirit and praxis of the occupation are what these young men were experiencing and practicing in their army service in the occupied Palestinian territories, where aggression and violence are the legitimate normal conduct. This is important, it's legitimate. It is normal to conceive the Palestinians as less than human beings. The Palestinian is the one you, as a soldier, may beat, may invade his home at midnight, create havoc, scare his children, and arrest him for no reason. The soldier takes it for granted that what he is doing is okay, is normal and legitimate, because no one told him that it is not normal or immoral. All he does is legitimate. This is the new normality. Nothing in his personal history of the soldier can explain his conduct, since he didn't suffer from the Nazi regime. He didn't witness the atrocities of the Second Intifada. He's too young for that. But his hate batteries were charged in his army service, and he internalized it. The legitimate hate and aggression are inside him. Since there is no green line for him, for the soldier, or the young people in Bat Yam, Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories are one unit. Where no green line exists, there is also no red line. It is under the same legitimation that he is allowed to hate the Arab there and here. He may treat them in the same normal, legitimate way. This is how the occupation flows without any barrier from the OPT into the Zik psyche. Where there is no border, there is no limits. In Hebrew, it's a nice way to say it, but we don't understand Hebrew. How can we bring about a political solution to the psychopathic state of the Zik? I think that the world should intervene and force the psychopaths to change their way, as done with South Africa in the past. The recent declaration of Human Rights Watch in Hague that Israel is responsible for crimes against humanity, apartheid, and persecution is a good start in the above direction. Some clues for direction for change. From the point of view of the State of Israel, critical political thinking together with political activity constitute a severe threat. Within such political thought and actions, manifestations of solidarity between Israeli Jews and Palestinians are the most dangerous for the reigning hegemony. The war waged by the state against small groups that carry out activities of solidarity with the Palestinians serves as evidence to how important it is for the state to prevent or to destroy such activities. We may consider two directions where it is most desirable if the two can be combined. The first is critical thinking and reality testing that should be performed as much as possible in a manner that is clean of external influence by radio, by TV, by leaders talk. By this I mean to shatter the obvious. כמובן מאומן. Do not accept as truth what you are told and question everything. Think, check, criticize, and then think again, please. The second is political work. All I can suggest is for each one of us to join some group that is involved in political dissent and struggle, of course, to create possible to, or of course, to create a new group. The struggle is against the apartheid and Jewish supremacy in all its manifestations within the Green Line and outside of it. Definitely, it should be done within our private consciousness and mind. The international activists might also consider supporting the BDS Palestinian movement. A good idea. We need to find different ways to overcome the silencing and the exclusion by the state. No less important is to find ways to shake the people out of their moral indifference, which hides beneath a convenient self-imposed identity of not being political and hence not being required to know, see, hear, and definitely not to think or do. Without us, the challengers of the obvious, a change will not come about. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. That was just, again, I'd say it about every speaker, but it's so heartbreaking how these mental health conditions, antisocial personality disorder, cognitive dissonance, even psychopathy are becoming so normalized in the region. One line that you said will stick with me, I think, for a very long time. The hate batteries were charged in his army service. I mean, what an image that is. And I loved your call to action. Number one, do not believe everything you hear. And number two, get involved in some kind of political work, and such as BDS if you're international and so forth. So I really appreciate everything you said. We have a fellow Israeli psychotherapist, Iris Singer, who has said that they wholly support everything that you are saying. And we have had a couple of questions along the lines of how did you first become aware of the Palestinian experience, and how did you become involved in human rights work? Would you mind answering that for us?
Well, it's a too big question. I was brought up in Jerusalem before the state of Israel. My neighbors were Palestinians, and it was a kind of a normal milieu. So for me, it was nothing, as you say, to write home about, to talk, to play with Palestinian children was part of my life. And then when the state of Israel was born, my family moved to another place, not in Jerusalem. And once again, the neighborhood people were Palestinians. Extremely nice family with 2 children, a boy and a girl. And they were my best friends. So for me, it's normal. And then, after not so very many years, I saw the cruelty against Palestinians, which I'm not going to describe because it's too long and too painful. And then I realized that something very unjust is going on. And I felt in my body that I cannot agree to it. And since it was like something between 60 and 70 years ago, I still feel it. And I cannot stand injustice. So on one hand, on the other hand, some very, very good friends of mine are Palestinians. So it is easy for me to combine the two. I would like to continue to be their friends. I would like them to take me as a friend and not as an enemy, which I'm not. And just to wish that more people like in this way of thinking and behaving will be in this place, which I'm sure it's not going to happen in my lifetime. But for sure, it's what I do wish and do want.
I don't know if that was a family member in the background, the little girl in the tutu, but I feel like that was a bit of the light relief that we all need today and right now, to remember that the children just want to be children, because today has been quite heavy, very important, but definitely very intense. So thank you for that. We've got a question from Vivian Hart. She's asking, are there any young Israeli doctors or psychotherapists involved with the Association of Israeli and Palestinian physicians for human rights? My own field of group analysis does not fill me with much hope. Hopefully you can give us more.
היא שואלת האם אנשי בריאות נפש ישראלים פעילים בארגון של רופאים לזכויות אדם.
Very little of them. It's not popular at all.
Yeah.
To my great sorrow. Some.
Well, that was a short answer. But we've got another question from Claire Fishman. Thank you for sharing your perspective and your experiences. That comes from all of us, I think. Do you think there are any specific interventions that could help change the mindsets of Israelis who are for the occupation and or dehumanize Palestinians?
Well, I do not like what I'm going to say. And I apologize. I think that what's going on in Israel in the last few years is so terrible and so profound that without a real punishment, a real punishment from the world, nothing will change. So this is why I was so happy to hear about the Human Rights Watch declaration. I hope that they can do something practical, not only declaration, because this, to my understanding, is the one thing that Israelis will take into consideration. Another thing which is and not a realistic one, but I wish that the huge American money will stop flowing from the States to Israel. But it's not in my hand. I cannot do anything about it.
Thank you. Yes.
האם הדוח של בצלם שהגדיר שקרא לישראל מדינת אפרטהייד שינה משהו?
לא. No, I'm sorry to say.
I'll just say the question in English, sorry, so that everyone knows what you're answering. Martin Kemp says, did the B'Tselem report calling Israel an apartheid society make any impact?
Maybe a little impact, but not a big one. I was giving more or less the same talk like 10 years ago in London, it was. And I was punished for it in my own group, Physicians for Human Rights. They told me you can say it only in your name, not in our name, not in the group name. Now it's not everyone, but many people can say apartheid in Israel. But what do they mean? Do they realize what it is? Are they going to do anything against it? I doubt it. Maybe in the future, but not really now. Though it was very brave and very good that, what's his name? I don't remember now, that he went into the open with the Israeli apartheid. It's wonderful that he did it. And maybe it should take time, like every process, till it will work.
Were you talking about Desmond Tutu? No?
About
Desmond Tutu? Bishop
No,
Desmond Tutu?
no.
I thought that might be who you were referring to. But yes, it is definitely becoming more widespread, the use of this word apartheid with regards to Israel.
It must be a process and it takes time.
Yeah. And everyone here is definitely very much a part of that process. So we're very grateful for you, Doctor, for coming along and speaking to us today, and for everyone attending. I would like to thank also your interpreter there, whose name I don't know, but thank you again very much. Hello, for helping us today. So
her name is Esther Rappaport. She more or less created the Joining Resistance group, which is a very small, wonderful group. So she knows what we are talking about.
Fantastic. Well, then in that case, it's an honor to have you as well. So thank you.
Can I just make a brief comment specific on the pertaining to the question about the term apartheid?
Yes.
So I'm also part of a group of a really pretty large group of academics here, activist academics called Academics for Equality. And now at this time there is a study seminar that people have organized and are carrying on, that I'm not participating in myself, but I see the updates. And in this group, kind of Israeli activist, political kind of historians and sociologists, they read a lot of texts, and they examine a lot of evidence to kind of protect. And their main, I think their main conclusion is that really the term occupation doesn't apply anymore, should not be used, and the term apartheid should replace the term occupation, that the term occupation is misleading at this point, and that the apartheid is the correct term, because it is not, this is not a temporary situation, this is not going away, and it is not only happening there, as Ruchama was explaining. It is happening all over the land, the region.
Thank you. That is a really, really interesting point. So thank you for that, and again for helping out. And thank you, Doctor. We'll say goodbye to you now, but you've been fantastic.